are talking about tens of billions of dollars of overpricing in these power projects, in the infrastructure projects. Many of these infrastructure projects are also not really required, like tunnels which go nowhere, roads which are underused, a nuclear power plant which no one knows when it will start because we have no way of getting all the international clearances. It is built by a Russian company which might not be awarded the clearances to operate this. So we have sunk tens of billions of dollars into investments where the returns are very uncertain. I was in the National Power Review Committee, and that committee has come up with a report which I think everyone should see, which shows a huge amount of overpricing and unnecessary investments in the power sector. So what we found is that the Power Development Board now needs 4.9, almost $5 billion subsidy every year just to sell the power. $5 billion every year. Can you imagine? Bangladesh's reserves are about 25 to something billion dollars. We are spending $5 billion a year as power level subsidy. Why? Because the Power Development Board is buying very expensive power and then selling it at a price that people can afford. If you look at our power prices in industry, the industry power price in Bangladesh is about the same as India, Vietnam, and our competitors, around 10 cents per unit. But this 10 cents per unit is because of this $5 billion subsidy. If you remove this subsidy, power prices would go up 86%. Now, if our power prices went up 86%, we would deindustrialize in one day. Our industry will not be able to compete. So you cannot get rid of the subsidy by raising power prices to consumers. The only way to reduce the subsidy is to reduce the price at which you are buying power from the producers. That's the only solution. Because they overpriced it at the point of contracting. So, you know, from 2011 to 2024, we have a four-fold increase in power, but 11-fold increase in the cost and a 20-fold increase in capacity charges. So there are two reasons why the power cost has gone up. One is that the power projects are overpriced by around 40 to 80% depending on the project, but also that many of these power plants are lying idle. They don't have any energy. There's no gas, there is no coal. So around 30 to 40% of our capacity is lying idle and picking up capacity charges. So if you put these two things together, overpriced contracts and capacity charges, you have the $5 billion loss. It's a mess. It would take a lot of effort to clean this mess. And over the last, interim government period, we have just identified the mess. The new government will have to solve the mess. Because if you cannot solve the mess, we have an unsustainable problem here. We will either go into unsustainable debt, because the government will have to borrow money to pay this $5 billion every year, or you will deindustrialize with rising prices. Okay, now let me do a quick calculation of one project. This is the Adani project in Bangladesh. So you have a comparison of how much the price differences are. We have spent a lot of time doing this comparison because Adani is a global company, so we can compare Adani's Indian prices, Adani's Sri Lankan prices, Adani's Bangladesh prices. Adani's Indian prices are low, but Adani's Sri Lanka price and Adani's Bangladesh price are very high. So this is a very good comparison, how this kind of collusion happens. So the Godda project has some parallels with the Mannar project in Sri Lanka. But this is another very interesting project. The power plant is in India, in Jharkhand, which is a coal state. Jharkhand has a lot of coal. It's a coal-fired power plant. But Adani does not use Jharkhand coal because that's not allowed by Indian law. You cannot use Indian coal to export power. So the coal is bought from Australia, taken to Jharkhand, converted into electricity, And then there is a 100-kilometer transmission line which costs $500 million. And the $500 million transmission line price is included in the price we are paying for the coal. And the coal is valued using an index number which is completely meaningless because it is an average of heat rates which are much higher than the heat rate of the Adani coal. So we are being stolen from by multiple, fixes. The price that was set for the Adani coal, again, remember, so it's 8.61 cents, is comparable to the Mannar price. But at that time, Bangladesh was importing power from the Indian grid at 4.5 cents. So Bangladesh is connected to the Indian grid. We are buying power at 4.5 cents from the Indian grid. Then you set up a dedicated plant just for Bangladesh. The logic should be that should be cheaper than buying from the Indian grid because we are taking all the risk and paying capacity charges. It is a dedicated plant just for Bangladesh, but the dedicated plant is twice the price of just buying from the Indian grid. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever, right? So the only way you can justify it is that there was massive corruption. And doing a similar calculation of levelized pricing that we used in Mannar, we estimate that the power price is 40 to 50% higher than what it should be. The price should be around 5 cents. It is 8.6 cents. Now, what does that mean? This 40% overpricing. Now you see the catastrophic implications of these decisions. We are paying Adani roughly $1 billion per year. Over 25 years, we will be paying Adani $25 billion. If it is 40 to 50% overpriced, we are paying Adani an extra $10 billion. Just one power plant. Now you add up all the power plants that exist in Bangladesh which are similarly overpriced, you can understand the catastrophe that exists. This cannot be paid. You cannot pay extra $10 billion for power that you need, but you cannot afford. And then you are covering this up with subsidies from the exchequer to reduce that price. This is not sustainable. Okay. In addition, the National Review Committee has collected a lot of hard evidence on the corruption of bureaucrats who signed the Adani contract. So we have a lot of evidence of corruption, and we hope the new government will take some action against this because this is the kind of contract that needs to be seriously either cancelled or renegotiated. Now, why does this kind of violation happen? So I'm going to go into a little bit of theory and then come up with some policy answers. 10 to 15 minutes, okay. So normally when we think of governance, we are talking about what we call vertical governance. So there are regulators, there is parliamentary oversight, there's anti-corruption. So this is the top circle. And the regulators are supposed to be observing the people who could be corrupt. So the people who could be corrupt are the bureaucrats, politicians, businesses. And this is what is called good governance. Good governance is when this kind of vertical monitoring is strong. And this vertical monitoring is based on transparency and accountability. So the regulator should know what is happening, and the regulator should be able to act on what is happening. So this is what good governance is understood in modern, liberal political economy. But in developing countries, this does not work. In developing countries, corruption happens even when you know that corruption is happening. So it's transparent. And you know that there are rules to stop it, but the rules are not being applied. So in developing countries, simply strengthening transparency and accountability does not work. Why does it not work? The reason it doesn't work is that in developing countries, the overall rule of law is weak, which means that you might know that someone is corrupt, you might have the court, you might have the anti-corruption commission, but you don't have the power to do anything. It's a problem of power, not electrical power, but political power. You have no power to stop the people who are doing corruption. Now, why is that? And the answer is that actually this regulator in the center is embedded in a lot of other social relationships. The regulator, the principal, is under pressure from a lot of other actors who we call horizontal actors. And the corrupt actor is also in relationships with a lot of other actors we call horizontal actors. Now, regulation works when all these horizontal actors want rules to be enforced, right? So if I am a regulator, if I am not doing my job, if you are in a rule of law country, you will be under pressure from other actors, from the media, from politicians, from think tanks, from other businesses, competitors who will say, you have to enforce this. So the regulator is under pressure to do the job. And if you are a corrupt person, you are under pressure from your competitors. You have been caught. Please pay the fine, because we will not do business with you if you don't. So both the principal and the agent in a rule of law country is under a lot of pressure to follow the rules. This is exactly what does not happen in a developing country. In a developing country, these horizontal actors don't have the power to put pressure on the regulator or the corrupt. It's very important to understand. It's not about good people and bad people and so on. It's simply that the pressure is not there. On the contrary, what you have in a developing country is the reverse. The regulator who tries to regulate will be removed. So the horizontal actors come and stop you from regulating. The business who is corrupt will have a lot of support from other businesses because they are also corrupt. So instead of horizontal check, you have a horizontal collusion. And this horizontal collusion makes it very difficult to enforce rules in the standard way. So this is why we argue you have to think outside the box. Just focusing on transparency, accountability will not work in a developing country. So we have a lot of theoretical stuff on this. I'm not going to go into this. I mean, because of time reasons, let me go into some of the conclusions. So in developing countries, what happens is that these regulatory bodies are under, instead of checks from outside society to do their job, they come under a lot of horizontal pressures to not do their job. You know, the judge who tries to prosecute a powerful businessman will be removed. The anti-corruption commission who tries to catch the corrupt bureaucrat will be stopped. So it's the reverse of these horizontal pressures. So this ultimately reflects the low level of development of productive forces, of people who have an interest in following rules because their own business requires them to follow rules. So this gradually improves as the country becomes more developed, but what do we do right now? So the question is, what do we do right now when these pressures are weak? And the answer is that you simply cannot rely just on the vertical enforcement. You have to directly build some of these horizontal checks, because without those horizontal checks, the vertical enforcement will not work. And we have some strategies of how we can do that. So just strengthening regulatory bodies like BERC, the Energy Regulatory Commission, is insufficient, because BERC was in operation during the Awami League rule. They were observing what was going on, they were reporting what was going on, but it had no effect. Okay, because BERC had very little power to enforce anything. So simply saying we will strengthen BERC or strengthen other regulatory bodies doesn't work. And we have seen this both in Bangladesh and in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, we have the Public Utilities Commission, which again is a bureaucratic body. It is supposed to provide oversight. It achieves very little. Because these bureaucratic horizontal check doesn't work on other bureaucrats, right? The horizontal check has to come from other powerful actors who have a real interest in stopping the corruption. So the challenge is to think, who are these characters, who are these actors who we can bring in to put that pressure? And the answer is very context specific. What will work in Sri Lanka will not work in Bangladesh. So I will pass over this governance diagnostic from Sri Lanka because of time reasons. It's there in the paper. So we suggest there are two main lines of attack. if you want to create this horizon. The first line of attack is we need to take tough legal action now and then on one or two cases where the example of corruption is very strong and where you can build some social pressure to take action. So social pressure to take action supported by strong evidence can send a signal to highly corrupt people that they don't have impunity. This is why I think the Adani case in Bangladesh is very interesting, because there's a lot of social pressure to take action against Adani. There are cases in the Bangladeshi courts against Adani. The international evidence is very strong against Adani. Adani is being prosecuted by the United States Department of Justice for corruption in India. Okay, Adani is been revealed in the European countries for insider trading. So this is a very relatively easy target, well known internationally for corruption. We have very strong evidence. There is social pressure. That horizontal check might result in a successful action, which then sends a signal to other companies that, look, you have to be careful. So one strategy is occasionally using a lot of horizontal pressure to achieve success. People need to see that you can achieve success. The second is we have to find other kinds of horizontal checks which go beyond bureaucratic agencies to increase competition in the sector. So this is a very interesting and important idea. I don't know how many. Can I have 5 minutes? Okay. So our research also shows that if you can increase competition in the sector, that is itself a form of horizontal check. Now, how do you increase competition in the sector? The problem is that okay, so sorry, I wanted to say that, creating the pressure for prosecution, the National Review Committee played a very important role. The National Review Committee played an important role because it assisted the investigation using its own horizontal check so that the investigation produced the evidence that is now actionable. So one question, if you want to do prosecutions, can something like the NRC be replicated? And in the report of the National Review Committee, we suggest an Energy Oversight Commission. Energy Oversight Commission is not a bureaucratic body like BERC. So Energy Oversight Commission will be more like the NRC. It will be external experts who are appointed without payment, so you don't pay them. They are just good citizens who are experts in the field, whose job is to provide oversight technically and in terms of monitoring, just like the National Review Committee did. I think this is a very good model because it creates horizontal pressure on the agencies, on PDB and so on. Would a government do this? Most governments would not like external bodies putting pressure. But I think that the crisis that we are in now, $5 billion deficit, unsustainable power prices, maybe this is the right time that the government might want pressure from somewhere so that they can do some of this reform. So this is an opportunity for something like the NRC to become an Energy Oversight Commission, which will continue to give pressure till this problem can be resolved. This is something that we would want to take to the new government. Now, the other thing that I was talking about, apart from prosecution, is competition. And competition can be enhanced by changing technology. So one of the things that we saw in Sri Lanka is that prices in power projects have come down because Sri Lanka has moved away from mega projects into smaller projects, smaller wind and solar battery-driven projects. Now the technology allows these projects to be done with lower investment, and the more investors that become interested in competing, the horizontal checks increase and corruption comes down. So one is to shift away from mega projects into smaller projects, have more investors, have more competition. This is some evidence of this we have seen in Sri Lanka. The other evidence is from other earlier research that we did in Bangladesh, which is actually funded by the FCDO, on the anti-corruption evidence program that I'm also involved in. And there we found that in Bangladesh, you can reduce corruption in power projects if you can use incentives to bring in politically unconnected investors. So what we found is that if you can provide some small amounts of low interest loans, conditional to the fact that the bidding has to be competitive, this brings in politically unconnected investors into the bidding process, and suddenly the prices significantly drop. This is like magic. I mean, and we show this with Bangladeshi data. So we show that, a small financing, provided that the bidding is competitive, has a 25% effect on the prices that are bid. This is again a horizontal check. If you can bring in new competitors, if you can attract them by reducing their risk, the horizontal check reduces corruption and you have a significant decline in price. Some more evidence that we have recently done shows the same thing, that projects which have international financing and competition are significantly cheaper than projects which don't. So again, these econometric findings show that the effect of competition is a very strong effect on corruption and collusion coming down. I had to go very fast through some of these results, but I'm trying to give the overall picture. So the basic conclusion is that we cannot simply rely on good governance, transparency, accountability, and bureaucratic checks. We have to go beyond them to think outside the box, to think of horizontal actors, because these horizontal actors don't already exist in a developing country. In an advanced country, there are lots of horizontal actors. So in an advanced country, as soon as corruption is detected, you can be sure something will happen. Because a lot of actors will come in and put pressure, something will happen. In a developing country, you might detect corruption and nothing will happen. Because the horizontal actors are not there, they're not strong, they're not powerful. So in a developing country, we have to create the horizontal actors. We have to create policy that generates the horizontal pressure so that something will happen. This is the key message. The key message is just doing transparency, accountability won't work. You have to think about how you create the horizontal actors. And so, horizontal actors also know the inside information. They know the technology, they know the financing. Outsiders cannot say this is an overpriced contract. But insiders know this is an overpriced contract. And if they are competing for that same project, they will put pressure to put prices down. Okay, so the two things let me repeat the two main conclusions. First, in Bangladesh we have a large legacy problem of bad investments from the past. If we are not careful, we will creep towards a default. Remember what I said, a default will happen suddenly, without warning. So this large legacy problem, lot of corrupt infrastructure projects, lot of claims on liabilities. Adani, for example, has arrears of $500 million. They are taking Bangladesh to the arbitration court to get their $500 million. There are many other power plants with arrears. They are all going to take Bangladesh to court. The new government will have to face all these arrears. You cannot just face it. You will have to take on some of these corrupt people, and you will have to take them to court for corruption, and the Adani case is a very good place to start. Secondly, we have to think about bringing in high capability actors, investors, to increase the competition and create horizontal checks. So these are the two main policy conclusions. Targeted prosecution and renegotiation, and secondly, think outside the box how to increase competition. Maybe smaller projects, maybe have financing support to bring in politically unconnected investors, maybe allocate land to projects. But all of this should be conditional on the bid being competitive. So you should not allocate land to cronies. You should not give a low interest loan to a crony. The loan should be to the project, provided the project is a competitive one. That brings in unconnected investors. So I can spell this out later, but this is basically the conclusion. And I think we need to act fast because we are creeping towards a Sri Lanka type situation if we are not careful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very intense and focused discussions and keynote presentation. I believe the context of the whole presentation have been properly revealed, and also this is a good call as well, in a sense that the two-third majority is a landslide victory is also the very much in popular support. It is also the risky in terms of check and balance. So I believe the whole message of this presentation is that how to ensure the quality check and balance and within the system as well as outside the system. So if you see some of the figures is really very alarming, in a sense that if you see the $5 billion subsidy, energy is the lifeline of the economy, undoubtedly. There is no opportunity to attain the prosperity without energy, which is an economic lifeline. But at the same time, maintaining the continuation of the $5 billion subsidy annually, the country will be actually the bankrupt. If you see the current external debt burden is almost more than $100 billion, almost 116 or something like that. If you can see particularly the external borrowing, it has been tremendously growing. And the one particular concern is that the draft power sector energy master plan, what has been already adopted, if that has been mostly focusing on the LNG based, the energy supply, additionally the tax debt GDP ratio will have to be gone up by 2 to 3% every year. So this is fundamentally very much challenging. This is how to make a balance between the efficiency and the drainage of the dollar and at the same time continuation of the access to power. This has been properly spelled out, and that is the findings from the presentation is really very much crucial, that how to make it more on oversight mechanism also internally and externally. Just think about the $10 billion additional money would be given by to the Adani. It is almost the equivalent cost of 1,000 megawatt solar power installation in Bangladesh. We are running after the money for the renewables, but at the same time we are donating money the globally quote and unquote very much corrupt company Adani. So such a imbalance in the decision making process. So this is fundamentally the new government has already been in place. So I believe the Adani case would not only the Adani case but also the very much corruption prone contracts would be either revised or the cancelled, because this is the totally unacceptable for the new Bangladesh what we have already running through. So finally, I would say the proposal from the Energy Oversight Commission, we have Energy Regulatory Commission, that has been already pocketed by the Minister of Energy and Power. There is no public hearing at all. It has been something like the staged drama, something like that. So I believe this commission should be first formalized with the professionals and also dedicated people who have a proven track record on the integrity, at the same time capacity. But at the same time, the committee, Professor Mushtaq has proposed that Energy Oversight Commissions or something, Energy and Power Oversight Commission or EPOC, something like that, should be formed by the citizen-led approach. And the current government should have several commission reports have been submitted. I don't know what will be the status of the new government whenever it has been in place or not, but I believe this is the right time to ensure the horizontal and vertical check in proper manner, so that sometimes there is a popular pressure within the party systems or in the government, but if you have a strong oversight in the citizen, that would give the safety and security not to be imbalanced in the power. So that is really very much, the safeguard for any government who have come with a landslide victory. So I believe that should be kept in mind. So I'm not going detail about the whole, their presentation is there. I am lots of designated speakers and the guests are there. So we are running after the time. So I would request, I will start with the designated speakers. I would request 3 to 5 minutes max, please, so that everyone can just get the opportunity to speak. So I will start with Mr. Kausar Chaudhary from the Bangladesh America Alliance. Just start with your words, some words, and 5 minutes max. Thank you, please. Let's start with the discussion. Mr. Kausar Chaudhary.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you to both of you and Mushtaq Bhai especially for inviting me. So actually, Mushtaq Bhai is the one who got me interested into the power sector. I had no idea this was such a big mess in Bangladesh, and the more I'm getting into it, I'm realizing that this is an existential crisis for the country. So, Mushtaq Bhai, I had a few questions for you, rather than saying, because you guys are the experts, right? So I had a few questions to you and to the other senior panelists. I would be grateful if you could reply. The first thing I wanted to be very clear about is that $5 billion, right? What's the exact breakdown of that? I'm trying to actually grapple on that, number one. Number two is that I've been reading that white paper that you guys created. So there's, I believe, 9,500 megawatts of extra capacity that was built, right? So what should be done to that? I mean, you're discussing about creating, alternate power sources, right? So that is something, actually, after my many discussions with you, I came up with this idea of proposing solar canopies on the Zia Rahman canals, right? So that would, because the biggest problem, I actually tried, I'll just say a little bit of history, 8 years ago to try to set up a solar plant in Rangpur. But after they found out who I was, the Amali government, they kind of rescinded my contract. It was all approved, everything was done. So the moment they found out who I was, they canceled that. It was for about a small one, 35 megawatt. So I know the technicalities on how to get solar done, right? So I had that idea that really coincides with what Mushtaq Bhai was saying, that we need smaller players. So I'm in this idea that I'm putting together. In fact, I'm meeting a couple of experts today again, the same team I used 8 years ago. So that whole idea of if we can because the biggest problem we had was acquiring land. So if you want to do that immediately, right? If you want to do that, say, from tomorrow, and within 6 months we want to, start providing alternate power sources immediately, tap into the network, then having a pre-arranged land that is already bought by the government would give us, it would take away years of work, because I think everybody knows how hard it is to buy land in this country, right? And then most people, they go around, you're buying mostly from farmers, and then you underpay